Former friend who once called me a bad influence for being child-free now wants to move his family into my home. Let me start by saying this isn't a post asking if I did the right thing. I know I did. I'm just venting about an emotionally exhausting day, and I know the child-free community will get where I'm coming from. The basics. A former friend of mine, Dave, not his real name, whom I haven't heard from in nearly 3 years, reached out to me today. He says he's facing a home emergency and needs a place for him, his wife, and their 3 kids to stay while their house situation is being fixed. Keep in mind, this is the same guy who, a few years ago, told me that being child-free made me a bad influence on his family. A little backstory. The friendship ended when I was going through an incredibly difficult time. My father was dying, and my life was falling apart in the span of a few months. I was seeking comfort, but instead, Dave told me that my child-free lifestyle was a bad influence on his kids. At the time, he had a wife and 2 children, and he made it clear they didn't want to spend time with me anymore because I wasn't helping their family's ideals. I had known him since grad school, and we'd shared countless fun memories, rock climbing, renting lake houses, and more. To be discarded like that, especially when I was going through such a hard time, hurt deeply. What stung the most was that I had supported him when his mom was diagnosed with cancer and even attended her funeral with him. For almost 3 years, we've had no contact, and I chalked it up to how people can change when they have kids. They adopt a more traditional mindset, and anyone who doesn't fit the "leave it to Beaver" mold becomes a threat. Today, then, out of nowhere, I get a text from Dave. I hadn't erased or blocked his number, so I saw his name pop up. He's asking if he and his family can stay with me because their water heater broke, and they're in an emergency situation. He knows I live in the same city now, and he says it would be such a huge favor. To say I was overwhelmed with emotions would be an understatement. Since he last spoke to me, he and his wife had another child. My first question was, why me? I asked him why he was reaching out to me for help, and his response was that he had no other options. No one else had the space for him and his 3 kids, especially with a 5-month-old baby in tow. I asked why they couldn't book a hotel, and he mentioned the high cost and how they're buried in medical debt from their new baby's NICU stay. I said, that sounds rough, but why me? He explained that he remembered I helped someone last year with emergency housing, and since I had extra room in my house, he figured I'd be open to doing the same for him. I was a little shocked since that situation was private. Quick detour. Last year, my college friend Kate, who has lupus, got COVID-19. It was a nightmare, and she ended up in the ICU. Kate was pregnant at the time, and her husband had to make the gut-wrenching decision to save her life over the baby. She survived, but it was a long road to recovery. During this time, Kate's brother and his wife needed a place to stay away from Kate's difficult mother. I had an extra room, so they stayed with me for 2 days while they found a more permanent place to stay. What I didn't know was that Kate's brother or his wife shared the story on Facebook, thanking me for helping them out. They had thanked me in person, but I didn't know it had been posted publicly. Back to today. Apparently, Dave saw that post and assumed I'd open my doors to his family, too. I told him no, and I was livid that he had the nerve to ask. He had once told me I was a bad influence on his kids, yet now, when it suited him, I was supposed to be the one to help. I reminded him that being child-free means not having kids in my home long-term. If I wanted kids around, I wouldn't have made the choice to be child-free. I told him I wouldn't uproot my life and disturb my 2 cats to host his 3 kids. He called me selfish and tried to guilt-trip me, asking me to think of his children and their lack of hot water. I responded, tough, you can charge a hotel to a credit card or ask a relative for help. He kept making excuses, mentioning the medical debt again, and said it would only be for a few days. I pointed out that a water heater could be fixed in a day or 2, and I wasn't going to risk this turning into a long-term situation. In my state, if someone stays with you for 7 days, they can claim tenant rights. He then threatened to blast me on social media, claiming I wouldn't help a family in need. I told him to go ahead. He hasn't been a real friend for years and doesn't even know my address. He only knows I live in the same city. I don't care what he shares online. I'm not on Facebook, and I'm not concerned about what people think. I told him that social media isn't real life, and if he shared this with our real friends, they'd laugh in his face. I also reminded him that I had all the text messages as proof of how he had treated me. I ended the conversation by telling him that he used to be a good guy, and I'm still sorry for what he's going through. but he's not someone I want in my life anymore. I wished him well but told him I couldn't have him around. I'm sure he'll understand, seeing as he once said the same about me. That's when I blocked him. It's sad, though. He used to be a decent person, and I genuinely liked his mom. It's hard to see how far he's fallen. Bracing for guilt trips about helping a former friend. I'm preparing myself for the inevitable guilt trips from flying monkeys who'll likely come out of nowhere trying to push me into taking in Dave's family. Can't wait to tell them to take him in themselves. I already talked to my two best friends about the situation, and both were shocked at how shameless Dave was in reaching out to me. They found it suspicious how aggressively he pushed for housing. 4 days. One of my friends kept talking about how her water heater broke recently, and a plumber came out the same day and fixed it. The whole, "we need a place because of the broken water heater" excuse didn't add up. They were both curious to know what was really going on. I agreed. I feel like there's something missing from his story. I can't help but feel a sense of righteousness about this whole situation. I know I did the right thing, but it does sting, remembering how a previous act of kindness was used against me years ago. Back then, I wondered if maybe I wasn't good enough, because I was struggling emotionally, like people just don't want to be around sad people. But now, with more clarity, I see it wasn't me, it was him. Dave's character had taken a sharp turn for the worse. Still, it did bring up some old, painful memories. Anyway, thanks for reading if you've made it this far. I had to get this off my chest. Update on Dave's water heater situation. Well, surprise, surprise, things have evolved much faster than I expected, less than 24 hours. In fact, I guess that's the benefit of having people work behind the scenes on your behalf. Huge thanks to everyone who commented on my last post. Your support has meant the world to me, and I knew you'd understand my frustration. As for my inbox, RIP, but I did read everything, and seriously, you guys are the best. Reddit community, not a single troll, which honestly feels like a miracle. Now, on to the update. I'm sitting here with a hot pot of tea. Seriously, grab your own. This is going to be a long one. All your instincts were spot on. The broken water heater, total lie. And, spoiler alert, Dave doesn't even have a water heater. You all probably saw this coming, didn't you? Here's what actually went down. Turns out, Dave sold his house 6 months ago, and he and Shelley, his wife, have been trying to buy a bigger home ever since. Right now, as I write this, they're already in a hotel with their kids, living comfortably with plenty of hot water. They've had no water heater problems, because they don't even need one. I can already imagine you all nodding along, saying, "Yep, knew it." So, here's how this all unraveled. My sister, who's in a different time zone, took it upon herself to investigate Dave. Her husband used to moonlight as a private investigator during grad school, and she has a real knack for digging up details. She's a little creepy, but in the best way possible. She also has a social media presence. Unlike me, I gave her Dave's full name, his wife's name, their kids' names, and an old address I had for him. Turns out, she went full detective mode. She discovered that Dave's house sold about 6 months ago. It went for way more than they originally bought it for. Classic seller's market move. She found the sale info and everything. But then, here's the kicker, she couldn't find any record of them buying a new house. In fact, the sale of their home looked like it went for $1, no follow-up property purchase anywhere. This is when I messaged my 2 friends from yesterday and told them what my sister found. No water heater problem because he doesn't even have one. Naturally, my friends were like, "Wait, what?" One of them, Allison, contacted my sister, and they started a full social media search. Turns out, my sister was worried that Dave might be trying to con me. Allison, who also went to grad school with us, had a loose connection with Dave on Facebook. Thanks to the wonders of Facebook, she was able to dig into his posts. Around the same time, I heard back from Kate's brother and sister-in-law, who had stayed with me during Kate's hospitalization. It turns out Kate's sister-in-law, Laura, had posted some pictures of my house back when they stayed with me, pictures of my cat lounging around and one of my monstera plant, which she loved. This is when things started to come together. I filled Laura in on the situation, and she felt horrible for possibly contributing to Dave's desire to move into my home. She quickly deleted the post and untagged me, sending me proof that she did so. I told her my sister was looking into things and could use help, so I connected her to my sister. Meanwhile, my sister was in touch with Allison, and it became clear that Dave's story didn't add up. By evening, I received texts from all 3 of them. sharing what they'd pieced together. Here's what they discovered. Dave and Shelley sold their house 6 months ago to cash in on the seller's market. The house sold quickly and for a hefty profit. Dave bragged about it. They had no contingency plan for buying another house before selling, thinking they could just jump into another one quickly with the money from the sale. However, they were outbid on every house they tried to buy. They refused to lower their budget or consider smaller homes, despite having 3 kids now. After exhausting their options, they moved in with friends. That temporary arrangement lasted longer than expected as they couldn't find a new house. They now have been moved around to a third place and still haven't found a home. It's clear they're overstaying their welcome. The people who've been hosting them are getting fed up, especially since Dave and Shelley refused to chip in for groceries or expenses. Most recently, their hosts asked them to leave as they needed the space for their own family over the holidays. Apparently, they've now been relying on the kindness of strangers, and still haven't found a permanent place. Dave's refusal to rent an apartment because it's like throwing money away is starting to sound more and more like entitlement. Anyway, I'll let you all draw your own conclusions, but it's safe to say that the water heater excuse was just the tip of the iceberg. My sister, Laura, and Allison all did a lot of digging to expose Dave's real situation. It looks like he was hoping I'd take him and his family in, an attempt to get a free place to stay while he continues to refuse any realistic solutions to his housing problem. Thanks again for reading, and I'll be sure to update you all if anything else comes up. Dave and his family are stuck in a difficult situation. They really need to stay within the city for work, but their only other options for free housing are Dave's brother, who lives 2 hours away, and Shelley's parents, who are 6 hours away. Neither of these options works for their jobs or their kids, who need to attend in-person classes. So, they were forced to book a hotel last minute. They're upset about it, though, especially because their kids are loud, and the hotel staff keeps asking them to be quieter. Dave and Shelley keep complaining about how unfair it is that they're living out of a hotel, lamenting that they can't seem to get a house despite having so much money. To be clear, they have more than enough money to afford this hotel stay, even though it's far pricier than renting an apartment. Dave, however, sees the hotel stay as a perk because there's no long-term lease involved. They can leave anytime. Plus, there's maid service, which is a nice bonus. Shelley, on the other hand, goes into full poor me mode, talking about how sad their kids are because they don't have a backyard to play in, and how living in a hotel doesn't let the kids be kids. A disturbing discovery. In the meantime, Allison took a deep dive through Shelley's social media posts and uncovered something unsettling from a past incident. It all goes back to the start of the pandemic when panic buying was rampant. People were hoarding toilet paper and food, and a former grad school friend reached out to me asking how I was holding up. At first, I thought she was checking in to offer support, but I soon realized her real goal was to ask me to give her food. I've always kept a well-stocked pantry and a chest freezer, a habit passed down from my grandmother who lived through World War II, and my mom did the same. So when this friend contacted me, asking for food because her kid was picky and wouldn't eat anything but homemade chicken nuggets, I was shocked by her audacity. I told her I wasn't going to give her my food, especially when it wasn't an actual food shortage, it was just panic buying. I suggested she visit a food bank if she was really desperate. When she called me selfish, I stood firm. Apparently, this friend took to social media to complain about me, and Shelley was right there supporting her. Shelley didn't understand why I wouldn't just give her some of my frozen chicken, calling me selfish for not helping a mother in need. Shelley even said it was weird for me to have so much food for just myself, implying I had issues. The web of social media. It became clear to me that the idea of me being a bad influence on their family wasn't just coming from Dave. It seemed Shelley had planted those seeds. I had been kind enough to let them stay with me for a few days when Kate was in the hospital, and Laura posted about my generosity. Shelley's comments at the time were all praise, saying how nice it was that I helped out and how lovely my home looked. But now, things felt different. A few days ago, Shelley posted about how her family had found a new place that was so cute, and that it had a great kitchen for her kids. That sounded like good news. But then, just yesterday, Dave texted me out of the blue after 3 years of no contact. He claimed his water heater was broken and asked if I could take in his family for a few days until it got fixed. We all know how that went. I told him no. And here's the kicker, this morning, Both Dave and Shelley made passive-aggressive posts about how society is terrible nowadays because friends don't help families in need. Shelley claimed that the cute home they'd found had fallen through, and she received a flood of sympathy from her Karen friends. She went on about how disappointed her kids were, playing up the drama for maximum attention. The lies and the fallout. After Dave sent that text about the broken water heater, Allison wasted no time in calling him out. She shared the screenshots of his text messages, exposing the lie. She and Laura started an all-out campaign to reveal the truth. Dave and Shelley didn't have any housing lined up. They were trying to manipulate me into taking them in by fabricating the water heater story, a plan I had never agreed to. Laura didn't hold back, calling them out as huge for trying to take advantage of me. Allison, who had been keeping quiet about the whole situation, went off. She dug up the drama from 3 years ago, the food incident where Dave had called me selfish. My true friends, like Allison, were fiercely defending me. Meanwhile, Dave had been making excuses about my bad influence on his family, all because I live a child-free lifestyle. Allison wasn't having it. She blasted Dave for being pathetic, thinking he could waltz back into my life after insulting me. People rallied behind me, calling out Dave for being cruel and now asking for favors. It turned into a full-blown social media storm. People described how awful Dave's family was to stay with, how messy and inconsiderate his kids were, and how much extra cleaning they had to do. Some of the people who'd let Dave's family stay with them over the last few months even came forward with their own horror stories, adding fuel to the fire. One person detailed how Dave's kids terrorized their pets, making life unbearable until they finally left. It was becoming clear that everyone saw right through his attempt to manipulate me. It was especially validating when people who hadn't spoken to me in a while spoke out. They shared stories of how I had helped them in grad school and even connected them to job opportunities. It was heartwarming to see how my kindness had been remembered, and it stung all the more that Dave, someone who should have known better, was trying to tear me down. Even Dave's own brother weighed in. Disgusted by his behavior, he reminded everyone how much I helped after their mom passed away and how she would be rolling in her grave if she knew how her son was treating me. My sister, who had been following the drama closely, finally got me to Zoom with her so she could show me the whole debacle on her screen. It was a relief to see that no one had come to me directly about not letting Dave's family stay with me. I had been bracing myself for a barrage of flying monkeys, but nothing came. Instead, it was Dave getting roasted online, and it was glorious. He'd threatened to put me on blast on Facebook, but now he was the one getting blasted. How incredibly stupid of him. He must have assumed that because I'm not on social media, I wouldn't catch on to his lies. But I had the text evidence, and I wasn't about to let him get away with it. The irony was rich. Dave was out there enjoying hot water in his hotel room, all while trying to pull off his scam. Reflecting on the situation, the hotel situation and growing frustration, as I sat down with a drink after work, processing everything, it became clear to me, Dave had planned to squat in my home. It all made sense now. When I mentioned tenant rights, Dave flipped out, which was a major red flag. He was trying to avoid paying for a real apartment, likely hoping to stay with me long enough to avoid hotel bills. It seemed like his plan was to leech off me and drain my resources so he could save up for a larger house with the proceeds from selling his old one. The more I thought about it, the more it felt like I had narrowly dodged a disaster. If I'd let them in, I'd likely be dealing with a drawn-out eviction process. Dave was trying to exploit my hospitality because I was single and child-free, easy prey for his freeloading. The final message. I decided to send him one last text, unblocking him just for this moment, and I made sure to tell him exactly what I thought before blocking him again. Here's what I wrote. Hey Dave, so I found out you were lying about that water heater. You don't even have a water heater. You're living in a hotel, and you're sitting on a pile of cash from selling your old home. It's really shitty of you to lie to me and try to get into my home. After everything you said about me being a bad influence, I can't believe you thought you could walk back into my life like nothing happened. Well, now you know, you are trash. Your mom would be ashamed of you. You're projecting your own faults onto me. If you still think I'm a bad influence, then don't worry about me ever helping you again. I'll keep my bad influence far away from your family. Lastly, Shelley sounds like she's become a real treat. The last thing I'll do for you is tell you that, as a father, it's your duty to pay for an apartment for your family. Stop playing these freeloading games. Here's a link to the Craigslist housing page in our area. I'm sure you'll find something. Oh, And I'll see you at the next alumni event. Looking forward to catching up, in person. With that, I was done. I said my piece. The worst part was realizing just how close I came to letting them into my home. The idea of that now makes me sick, especially knowing how manipulative and selfish they were being. I'd dodged a bullet. If I'd been any more trusting, I could have ended up with a nightmare on my hands.